Well, my name is Scherer from Amsterdam. I'm a visual artist and I will talk about my project Plantroot Weaving. The project actually is called Interwoven and it's about a growing material. The whole project started about 10 years ago with this image. The image, I think everybody knows this image, it's called Rootbound. Actually, it's something we don't like very much as a plant lover or gardener because the plant was for much too long in a pot. I put it on my studio wall and started to make photographs of these rootbound images. And maybe I have to tell a little bit more because I'm a visual artist and not a textile designer, not a fashion designer. But when I was 20, I followed a tailor apprenticeship. So that was my first contact with fashion or textile. And then later I went to the Rietveld Academy here in Amsterdam. And I graduated in photography and fine art. Then I worked for 10 years as a photographer. And also with this series, I started with photography. So I started in 2012 with the series Nurture Studies. Well, it's about plants, but it's also about my collection of vases. In every vase, or in every vase, I planted another plant, another seed. And the root system took over the form. Well, I had to break my whole vase collection, but I had a whole collection of new plant root systems. We made a book, which is also called Nurture Studies, and we published it here in the Netherlands at Van Zoetendaal Publishers. But I wanted to go on. I made these vases with so many different kind of roots. And actually, I just started to get very interested in the root system. And I started to compare it with yarn. So for example, this image is silk. This image is grass, but it reminds me on silk because it's very thin, soft, and white. This is verbena, and this reminded me very much of linen. It's a little bit glossy and strong. So I thought, would it be possible to weave the root system? This is an image I also found on the internet, so it looked kind of weaving to me, but I know to grow a tree like this would take me about 10 years, I guess. I didn't have time so long. So I went to a university in the Netherlands, Rietveld University, and they are the specialists in plant roots. I asked the professors if they could help me, the biologists, if there's a possibility maybe to weave the plant root system. And they knew my work, my former work, the Nurture Study series already, and they liked it and that you can come here and work with us, but it will never work to weave the root system. But after a year, I had this image, so it kind of worked. This is my first plant root lace. And this is a close-up. Here also you can see little hair roots, which are very important for the weaving. I will tell about this a little bit later. So the technique, we developed a technique below ground with templates. It's a collaboration with nature, which I really enjoy very much. I never know exactly what happens. Of course, I manipulate the root system, but still there are so many things happen when I harvest the work, which are not just really made by nature. I'm using the strengths of nature for this work. And the growing material I think the nice thing on this textile is that the material is weaving itself below ground. So there is no electricity involved, because the roots are so strong and they search for food, they search for space. So this is how they interweave in the template below ground. And this is usually all I tell about the technique. I often get the question, what are the templates made of and how does it work exactly? And as an artist, for me, it is actually, I know it's much nicer, much more interesting for the viewer if he or she doesn't know how exactly I made it. And as a material researcher, which I'm now too, I think it's good to protect the technique for now. So this is the work we just harvested in my studio. And these are two pieces of the same template with the same technique, or with the same pattern. On the left side, you can see the just harvested fresh piece, and on the right side, a piece which is already dried. So you can see actually on the left side still how the roots are searching, because now when I look at it, I would say I should have waited for 3 or 4 more days in the ground before I harvested it, because it's not ready yet. There's just something loose in the weaving. So another part of the work is rugs. I think this is, you see me there very excited because this is my first rug I ever made. It's, I think, about 3 by 150 meters. And on the right side, you see how we grew it in the greenhouses at the Rietveld University in Nijmegen in the Netherlands. In this technique, the soil is still involved. So we keep the soil, and that makes the material on the rug really thick. This is how we started. I use oats for this work, mainly. Grain is actually grass, and grain are the best plant sorts, because grass likes to be sewn together really dense. They don't mind, well, you know the image of a lawn with a lot of plants on it, or lots of grass on it. Usually plants like to fight below ground. The roots need space, they need water, and they need food. The grass doesn't mind, they love it to be together, and this is very important for me to create these strong root mats. On this image you see, I think, my biggest piece, which is about 4 by 2 meters, and the work is really heavy, so I always need people to help me. We created this rug for an exhibition at Into the Great Wide Open. It's a music festival in the Netherlands, and they asked me for the opening to make it. So we have this whole team to turn the work after the growing process finished it. And here we had it outside. Another rug I made for an exhibition, actually from Philippe in Lille by Edelkort. I think it was in 2017 in the Textile Museum here in the Netherlands, which was an exhibition about textiles and biofabricated new textiles. Well, the biofabricated plant-root textile is still a concept because it's very fragile. The technique is very young, so I think I need about more 10, 20 years to make a really strong textile for an application. The research is still speculative, but we know now, after all these years research, that the below ground biomass of plant roots is an overlooked natural research which we can use. Usually it's thrown away. Sometimes we eat it, of course, like roots, but if we look at grass and other kind of grain, corn, usually the roots will be thrown away. Sustainable, yes, it could be sustainable. Sustainable is such a big word. We will see, but there's one really big advantage. For example, if it would be possible to grow our own rugs or our textiles, our clothes in the garden outside. Roots are a carbon storage place. So the CO2 will be absorbed instead of emitted during the growing process and actually during the weaving process. Well, here you see me in my studio in Amsterdam with a big textile. And here we used, it's a tapestry. And here we used a technique so we don't have anymore the soil on the piece, which is different to the rugs. This is a close-up of the piece. You can see a little bit how the interlacement works, how the roots interweave. One thing of the material is we need to make it stronger. It's still so fragile. So there are different kind of things we tried. For example, one simple thing is just use more seeds. So on the left-hand side, you see the same pattern, the same template, and we use 20 times so much seeds as on the right side. And this works. It makes it, of course, much stronger. Another thing is we try to use man-made materials, textiles, some net, plastic, to make it stronger. The advantage is roots are strong and they search for every little hole they can find. So they grow into other textiles and they interweave and they stick together actually like a stitching thread. So here you can say plantroots, they work like stitching threads. Also, for me, this piece is interesting and important because I'm searching for color. We try to dye the material, which is difficult because when it gets wet, it gets not really much nicer. It shrinks a little. So we used, for example, here at the border, the yellow, orange color you see at the border is saffron, a natural color, and some curcuma. We also used madder, and the other colors are just green and orange fruit nuts. Another textile I used here, a natural textile to make it stronger. Or just some plastic net. Here I like the combination of the man-made material with a natural material, which is a beautiful interlacement. So, because my background is art and photography, I didn't know so much about material research. So I contacted the Technical University in Delft, and there is the Material Experience Lab. They're specialized in growing materials. And they were really excited. I worked with 2 students, and they did a master project on the Interwoven project. And we also were searching to make it stronger, but also maybe in a future application. One of the important research we did was microscopic, because we didn't know exactly how does it work, how is the interlacement of the roots, how do they interweave. And with the microscopic research we saw actually a very important or essential element of the contact is hair roots. These little hair roots, you can see them here. They work like glue. They stick the material together. So that was very good to see, and for example, one of the students, G.Y. Kneipe, she did a research on many different kind of plant roots. She tried to see chives, green onion, mung beans, corn, and oats. She compared, and after a while, she also saw, yes, oats are still actually the best in grain. You have an enormous amount of the hair roots, which will stick the whole material together. Also, this material, the growing process, involves a lot of dirt. We use soil usually as a growing medium. So we tried to find something else, which was algae. Agar is an algae. And we found out that it's a perfect growing medium for the roots, for the oats. After the growing process, the roots will dry out in a transparent medium and they get really strong. So here on this microscopic image, you can see still some hair roots and actually this film which is created by the algae. Yes, roots work like a stitching thread. This is one of the important research parts of my master student, G.Y. Kneipe. So she was curious, how is it possible also to grow a 3D body, a massive body of the roots? And she filled the pot with, or the growing container with beds, and we found out that actually the roots, they really work like stitching threads, and they just put all the beds together. Sometimes they even grow through the beds in the little holes. So this GY used to create a stool. It's actually a test stool, which is based on an IKEA stool, which is called a leader. It's a prototyping work. And she created her own filling material based on the beds. In the first test, she made these little round white structures. It's a 3D printed structure with PLA, a bio-based plastic, and it's perfect because the roots, they grow into it and they stick to it. And it worked that she created this 3D massive body as a first prototype. Collaboration with fashion, yes. I get quite some questions from the fashion world, and they ask me to use the material. For example, Sander Lack is a Dutch designer. He has a New York-based design label, Sis Marianne. And he asked me last December, I think, to use it for his new fall collection. And for me, it was very exciting. So I just sent him a couple of pieces and he used it in this way. For me, it was really nice to see it on the catwalk. He made 2 outfits of it. And yeah, it was on a catwalk at the New York Fashion Week last winter. Another collaboration with nature was the V&A. It's about 2 years ago, they had this exhibition, Fashion from Nature. It's a historical exhibition about textiles which are based on nature, and also new materials based on nature, and clothes. I made a dress. This was my first dress. I told you before, I had also this tailor experience when I was young, so I didn't make a dress, I think, for about 15 years, and I never grew a dress, so that was quite exciting because I didn't know, I think 2 weeks before the opening, if this would really work out, but it did. The dress you see is grown in 2 pieces, the front and the back, and just on the shoulders and on the side, it's stitched together with my own hand. The rest is all growing material. This is the back side of the dress, and also here you can see It's not a sewing line. This is really a growing line. This is how the templates create the material below ground. Some close-up of the dress. This is the last sculpture dress I made. I just showed it, or it's still on in a show in Lille, also a show of Philippe and Liedewij, A Labor of Love. And after I made the dress for the Victoria and Albert Museum, a lot of people thought, oh, Diana Scherer, she's a fashion designer, and I'm not a fashion, I'm an artist. So from now I make my dresses so long that they're more sculpture. Just to make more clear that I, maybe, you know, it's not bad, of course, to be a fashion designer, but it's for me to make clear that I'm a visual artist to work with this material. Yes, Burberry also asked me, they commissioned a work. They had a new logo, and two years ago, they came out with this new logo, and they asked a couple of artists to work with it in a special way. So I grew it in a textile. Botanical research. Yeah, in this project, there's quite a lot of botanical research involved because there are so many plants and so many plant roots, so many different kind of growing media, light. The botanical research I always do at the Rootbound University because they are specialized and they have really fantastic, beautiful, big greenhouses. This is an image of my oats. Here you can see how strong the roots of the grass really grows together, that it creates such a strong mat. They don't fight. If I would do the same with roses or with chamomile or other plants, they really would fight for a lot of space, food and water, and they wouldn't grow into my templates at all. This image is how we work at the Rietveld University. I see here some corn, we did some spinach, some basil roots. Also, we work with a light experiment with some yellow, red, and green light with the filters because the roots and the plants will grow differently with different light. Green light is really bad actually because it's just doesn't give any food to the plants. Red light and yellow light is really good. The best is the combination of red, yellow, and blue. This is an experiment we did with water plants. We used reed. We thought, wow, yes, water plants, that would be great because then we wouldn't have a dirt of the soil. Also, the water plants, they will clean the water during the growing process, and the roots are really strong and thick. Well, just to show you how often all the tests, it doesn't always work out, but it was very interesting to see that plant roots behave differently in water than in soil. So water plants are beautiful, but they won't interlace. The roots, they will swim next to each other, very loose, and I don't know why, but they just don't interlace with each other. Maybe because it is the water which makes them swim, or they have enough food. But it was very interesting. So I like the image, but we couldn't use material for further textile research. So in my exhibitions, I love to show all my work together. So in this exhibition I had in January for a couple of months at Droog Design in Amsterdam. They gave me an enormous big space, and I was able also to show the process, to grow the material, to show the tapestry, material research with the TU Delft, some rugs. So during this exhibition, I was able to harvest the material a couple of times and to grow it again. And so we invited quite a big audience to share with us the harvest moment. And here you see me harvesting the pieces in a performance. This is an exhibition at the Unseen Photo Fair in Amsterdam. I work still a lot with photography, but also in my photography exhibitions, I love to show the real material. Why photography still? Photography is for me at the moment actually the only way to keep it in a fresh state. The material, when I harvest it, it immediately will dry. And with the photography, what I do, I harvest the piece, and directly after the photography, I will make technical photographs. The technical camera also gives me the possibility to show details which we actually wouldn't see with our eyes. So here, for example, you really can see the hair roots I talked before. They stick together, which is the sticking connection material of the plant root weaving. Here are some photography images. And the technical camera also gives me the possibility to blow these images up to 2 by 2 meters. Yes, now I talk maybe a little about some colleagues. When I started with the textile, I did quite some research to see, so if there are other plant root weavers in this world, are there more colleagues using plant roots for weaving or to create a material? And the only plant root weavers I found is the population in Meghalaya, India. They make living bridges. They work like architects or more like engineers. So they grow these bridges, or these are actually the roots of the rubber trees, and they interweave and they grow these bridges over about 10 years. I think the beautiful thing of it is the bridges are still alive. My material will die after I harvest it, but they will live for about 600 years. It's a very old technique already. So here you see one of the people, how they do it. The pattern in my work, the structures and pattern I use in the textile, actually, they start in the computer. But when I started with the project, I mean, the whole world is full of pattern. And I decided after some time, I go back to nature and I want to follow the geometric order in nature. So the geometric order in nature is a very ancient philosophy, or an ancient like Plato, for example, he already worked with it. And it's quite special that we find all these geometric forms and structures, like a spiral, for example, here, or the hexagon in honeycomb, that we will find them in natural plants, or like snowflakes, the honeycomb. So here, for example, is also the hexagon honeycomb structure which we use for lace. I try to imitate this lace structure. It's one of my patterns. You see it in bubbles. So it's one of the strongest structures in nature, and this is the reason why this structure is so often used also in architecture. There are two man Ernst Haeckel and Karl Blossfeld. They're two artists and researchers, philosophers. They already studied this geometric order and art forms in nature a long time before me. This is two plates of Ernst Haeckel. What he actually did, he made microscopic images of sand and plants in the sea, and he was a very good artist, so he was drawing these images, and he was completely fascinated about the beautiful forms of nature. The other artist is Karl Blossfeld. Karl Blossfeld is a photographer, and he did a long-term research on the forms of nature, on plants. And he did this for his students. He wanted to teach his students in Jugendstil forms in this time. Later he became world famous with the photography. Well, unfortunately, he was already for a long time dead. And this is my last image to show how I combine or try to combine all these different patterns in my work. So you see a grid, a math grid, Cartesian grid is it called, some structures from nature. They are based on hexagon, honeycomb, but also on cells, and also some natural grown roots in my templates. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Diana. It's just so mesmerizing and also inspiring to see that there's also many other people like your students that are exploring the uses of this material. So thank you. You have an amazing radio voice. So even if we couldn't hear you, you have a very beautiful voice to listen to. So
thank you. Well, you can't see me, but at least you can hear me proper, so that's good. Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Welcome our next speaker, who is Abia Sekali. She is in Amman, Jordan, and I'm very excited to hear about her work today. She is a thinker and maker whose discipline transverses architecture, design, and cultural production, as well as art.